you want a Happy New Year. Our next speaker sure hopes we all get one, but he's not so sure it's on the menu. He'll offer some thoughts on that and some suggestions for inspiring or improving our chances. Working from speech number 67 in the Ancient Mariner's Manual. Let's welcome the bard from the Big Potato himself, distinguished Toastmaster, Jordan Camenker.
That was good. Happy New Year. We're all excited and we've got our resolutions, and by golly, we are ready to roll. We think it's going to be a Happy New Year. We're convinced it's going to be, and we're going to make it so. But I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I'm not going to wax political. I think there is a fairly substantial unraveling of the social fabric that has been proceeding apace for years, and I think that it threatens the fortunes of all of us, our spouses, our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, and it doesn't appear as though we're doing much to stop it. I think there is plenty of blame to allocate both on the left and on the right, and I will probably, much to your unhappiness, address it in subsequent speeches. I think the domestic policy embraced by the left is dangerous. I think the foreign policy increasingly embraced on the right harkens back to that of 100 years ago and is also dangerous. Many, many years ago, my mother, who had a gorgeous library, introduced me to a book by Barbara Tuchman. It was called A Distant Mirror, and it looked at life in the 13th century during the Black Death, the plague that swept Europe. I read the book and I was absolutely captivated. She's a brilliant historian. And I wouldn't have known, had I not read Tuchman's book, that there was another book she wrote, March of Folly. And March of Folly is an examination of how nations commit suicide. They embrace one notion or another. They pursue policies that are utterly destructive. And to those of us who are looking back across the expanse of time, we go, how in the heck could they have done that to themselves? But in the moment, they don't see it. Santayana told us that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Of course, that has a chance only if you remember the past, and of course that requires that you study, and that's not something we're inclined to do, is it? So I'm not particularly sanguine that it's going to be a great new year. Whether the social fabric really starts to fall apart today or tomorrow or in 6 months, I expect something's going to happen, and I don't think it's going to be good. We're not going to, each of us, save the world. Neither are we exempt from our obligation to do what we can to improve our small corner of it. We must do something. And I think we start by improving ourselves. So we're armed with all these resolutions. Ladies and gentlemen of the Toastmaster jury, I got you some resolutions. Right here in my little box of Jordy's goodies. Benjamin, thank you, sir. All right, so we start by working on ourselves. And one of the ways we work on ourselves is by reading. This is an ancient and forbidden art for many of us, I understand that. But it's worth the candle trying to reacquaint ourselves with this particular practice, reading. Some years now, it's been, what, a dozen or more years, Nicolas Cage came out with his book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brain. This is an excellent book. He followed it up with The Glass Cage. When he came to town a couple of years ago, I invited lots of people to join me in attending. You don't need to write these down. I'm going to put these, by the way, on the table for you all to take a look at them. On the heels of that, just a year or so ago, Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. This has swept the Western world, and it's worth a look. Many of you think that the United States is this awful place. You want to learn about the American experiment. Miracle at Philadelphia is a brilliant book. I've had it for almost half a century. And Founding Mothers. Not what the Founding Fathers did, but what the Founding Mothers did. Read about Abigail Adams, for example. This is absolutely gripping. These two books came out, this one almost 30 years ago, this one almost 40 years ago. No one listened, and we are, all of us, dumber by degrees of magnitude than our predecessors were. How do we turn it around? It might be worth looking at this. We hate each other. Go to the internet and see what people are saying. Ben Sasse, the former Republican senator from, what was it, Nebraska, one of the senators, and I don't, he clearly parted from his party at one point. Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal, an excellent book. And this one just out, I'm reading it, The Canceling of the American Mind, about which more in a subsequent speech. And finally, how do we go about it? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with but a single step. You're not going to heal the world until we work on ourselves. This is a good book, Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg, but the one everyone's talking about, and the one that's more accessible, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Let's work on ourselves, one habit at a time. Toastmaster.
Good job, young man.